Welcome to part 2 of the ins and outs of property investing. Today's theme will be on how to get you prepared for the inspection, the in-person inspection of a property. In the previous session, I went through some of the preliminary, due diligence that should be done before you visit a property. In today's session, I'll take that further. I'll build on what we discussed in the prior session. Now, let me begin today's session perhaps with a question, and I'd like you to think about the question as I put it forward. You've been to a restaurant, and let's assume you're of drinking age, and you ordered a bottle of wine. When you ordered the bottle of wine, did you observe that one of the first things that they did, if you had someone serving you, is that they opened the wine and they poured a little quantity into a glass for you to taste, to see if the wine was to your liking. Now, put that aside and also think about something else. If you own a car, I would imagine at the point of purchase, you were offered the option of test driving the car. I would also imagine that if you walked into a shop, a retail shop, and you were looking to buy some item of clothing, you were allowed to try out the clothes in the stores. Certainly not every single item, but most items you have the option to try them on to make sure that the item is to your taste and to your liking. And even when you've purchased the clothes or the item of clothing, there is usually sometimes a 30-day return policy, whereby if you have not used the item, you are allowed to bring back the item. If we go back to the idea of the car, in some locations, if you want to buy a car, they allow you to test drive not that particular car. Maybe they might have a show model. They allow you to drive the car for a day and bring it back, sometimes for 2 days. Now, all of these examples have similarities. There's a theme across all the 3 examples that I've used. The theme has to do with that you're afforded the opportunity to collect data before making a legal commitment. All of that information you collect is important because it minimizes buyer's remorse or regrets. Similarly, for example, I would hope that if you're married, or if you are in a committed relationship, when choosing your romantic partner, there was a period of dating before you committed to a long-term relationship. And all of that was also to ensure that you had enough time to observe the person and to collect data. Dating is for collecting data. Similarly, when it comes to investing, we have to look at how we behave in other areas of life and try to mimic such behaviors. And we bring that into investing. And part of the reason is because in property investing, the examples I gave you where you were offered the option of trying out the product or the service before committing, all of such opportunities do not exist when you're buying a building. Part of the reason for that is because the building sometimes is occupied. The building is, if it's not occupied, it's under the legal possession of someone else. And seldom is it possible for you to try out a property for a day or for a weekend before making a final commitment to buy it. Now, unfortunately, what we get is a limited amount of time for viewings. And when we carry out the viewings, we usually have the sales agent or the buyer's representative, or sometimes the buyer himself or herself, present. If it's done by an agent, you usually have a window of opportunity. Usually the viewing is carried out with the agent, guiding you through the property, and therefore the quality and the quantity of data you collect during your virtual or your in-person viewing usually would determine whether the purchase you make is successful. And it would also determine whether you would have any form of buyer's remorse, or if you discover unpleasant surprises at a later date. Now, I've explained all of that simply because I like to say that one of the reasons why property viewings and inspections are very, very important is so that you have the opportunity to collect as much data as you can so that your decisions are informed. In today's session, I will be talking about what to do during your viewing. But there are a few things that I'd like to maybe bring to your attention, because if you are going to be collecting data during your viewings, there are some things you need to be aware of to make sure that you are in the best position to get as much information as possible on your first visit. Now, usually sometimes it's possible to have multiple viewings. It's best to go once and collect as much data as you can, and then the second time you go not for the purpose of collecting additional data, but for the purpose of allowing yourself to see how you feel about the property after the initial rush of emotions. Now, in order for you to, I should have started by indicating that this is a session on property investing. In order for you to collect the best possible amount of information, there are a few things you need. And let me begin with some of the items that you should consider. These are items I always ensure that I have. Number one is a laser tape, a laser measuring device. I was thinking earlier on today, and I felt that one of the best ways for those who are not familiar with a laser tape would be to show you what mine looks like. That is my laser tape. If you haven't worked in the building industry as an architect, an engineer, a surveyor, or as a contractor, there is a possibility that your perception of space might not be as accurate as you think. Usually, when you're buying a property, let's assume that the property has several rooms. It's possible to walk into one of the rooms and assume that you have a good firm idea about the dimensions. The purpose of the laser tape is to ensure that you collect accurate information about the floor area. Usually the sales agent will provide you with a floor plan. But in my experience, each of those floor plans usually come with a disclaimer. And the disclaimer usually states something similar to this: dimensions are approximate and for illustration purposes only. In other words, the agent is saying, do not rely on the dimensions in the drawings. It's up to you to verify the accuracy yourself. So you should never wholly rely or wholly accept the dimensions provided on a floor plan. Instead, you should verify the accuracy of the floor area yourself. The best way to do this is by using a laser measuring device. Now, there are other ways of doing this using traditional tapes, and I have nothing against those, but if you bear in mind that sometimes when you're viewing a property, you could be carrying out a viewing with other people. So it could be an open viewing, and there could be other people walking around, and you may not have enough time, to extend the tape, or you may not have someone to hold one section of the tape for you whilst you move to the other section or the part of the building or the space. So the way the laser tape works is digital. For example, mine is activated now. If I want to measure the distance between, let's say, my hand, so you can see my hand, I don't know if you can see the red light, so it's on. It gives me the dimension immediately. So I can measure different locations. I can say, fine, I've done that. I can measure that distance. Also, the tape has functions. I can measure areas, I can measure volumes, and I can save memories. I can have memories that I can save dimensions. But the purpose of the laser tape is that it makes the process much easier. With a laser tape, you can very easily verify the internal heights of each space, which is much more difficult compared to when you're using a traditional tape. With the laser tape, you can size the hallway, the stairs. One of the things to keep in mind, and I'll talk about this as we move forward, there are some parts of Great Britain where single houses have been converted, single homes, I should say, have been converted to multiple units for various reasons. One of the reasons could be perhaps as a result of lack of homes for people. So a house that was originally designed as a single home and for single occupancy, for a family, has now been converted to 4 flats. What you tend to find is the communal stairs may have been kept the same, and in some cases, to maximize the floor area in each of the space, you could find that the communal hallway is very narrow. So imagine that this is a building and this is the external door leading into the building. And let's also imagine that what you have here is flat number 1. This goes upstairs. Flat number 2. And maybe this stops here. And on the upper floors, perhaps let's just say you have 2 other flats. If you're purchasing a property, you have to think about the logistics of how you get things into the property and out of the property. Always consider that furniture needs to move in. Furniture would need to be moved in and out. The logistics issue is very important, especially for flat and converted buildings or in apartments in new buildings. Now, most residential converted buildings, as I said, were originally designed as single dwellings. But if it's been subsequently converted into multiple units, there is a possibility that there is some logistics constraints, especially in the common or the communal area. If you have a laser tape, it's so easy to understand the dimensions of the space, so you can see if your items of furniture can be fit, or rather will fit, into the space. Now, I have, in some circumstances, I've seen the consequences of not considering the logistics of getting furniture in or getting furniture out of a building. In one particular instance, the owner had to part with some of their newly purchased items of furniture on arrival because they found that their new home, when they arrived with their furniture, the furniture was too wide for the entrance hallway, and so they could not get the item of furniture into the building. So the first thing you need It's a laser tape. Now I'll put this to the side. Let's go to item number 2. Obviously, it shouldn't come as a surprise. You need a writing pad, similar to what I'm doing just now. Your writing pad can be in paper form or it can be in digital form. I prefer paper form as it allows me to sketch, annotate, scribble. I can do sketches. I can do things. I can walk into a space and I could just put a note to say important, or I can say red flag. If you're using a handheld electronic device, it can be slightly less flexible as opposed to when you use a pen and a pencil. So keep that in mind. Number 3, what you need is the floor plan. The agent would normally have provided in advance, sometimes on their website, they should have provided the floor plan for the property in question. If they don't, you should ask for one. You need a printed copy of the floor layout during your inspection. The reason for that is because, like I explained before, you need to verify the floor areas. You want to verify the accuracy of each area. Secondly, if you think about a floor plan, and let's say there are several parts. Let's say this is the entrance, and the first part of the interior of the building is the living room. And then from the living room, you have different parts. Let's say that's the toilet, that's a bedroom, that's the second bedroom, that's the kitchen, and that's the hallway. I want you to think about the importance of what I call space flow. I also want you to keep in mind what I call internal adjacencies. If the first entrance into the building is the living area, then what that means is that, let's assume, to get to bedroom 1, you have to go through the living area. To get to the hallway, you have to go through the living area. To get to bedroom 2, you have to go through the living area. To get to the kitchen, through the living area. Now, what this means is that the space flow is somewhat constrained. Compare this or contrast this to a building where the main entrance is the hallway. And then from the hallway, you're welcomed into each space. Bedroom 1, living area. Bedroom 2, toilet. And then kitchen. What this means is that the occupants of the building can use the building without interfering with other members of the family. So, for example, if father and mom are hosting guests in the living room, and daughter wants to go out with her friends, or daughter wants to has study practice with her friend could arrive, walk into the hallway, and walk directly into the bedroom, and no one gets to see her daughter or see the daughter's friends. So think about the importance of space flow, internal adjacencies, and one of the reasons you also need the floor plan is so you can ascertain the orientation of the property, especially with regards to sunlight, noise, and ventilation. So let's look at this, for example. That's the living room. Let's assume that there are 2 windows, one window. If you walked into this building without a floor plan, it becomes very, very hard for you to appreciate and understand the orientation of the building in relation to its true north. So you always need a floor plan so you can ascertain how the building is positioned in relation to sunlight, but also in relation to if this is a major road. You want to know, how is it positioned in relation to the road? Is the living room facing the major road, which usually is preferable, and the bedrooms are at the rear so that there is peace and quiet at night when you sleep? So what you're looking for is to ensure that is considered noise in relation to cars and ventilation. The position of the windows, especially in built-up areas, can make a world of difference to the comfort and the well-being of the building occupant. So always keep in mind that the floor plan is something you need. Do not go to view a property, especially if you're not an experienced professional or experienced investor. Do not go to view a property without the floor plan, because you would walk away from the building having an idea, but no evidence. And never rely on your memory. You know, there's a saying that a blunt pencil is better than the sharpest mind. You need the floor plan so you can make notes, so you can understand adjacencies, so you can understand space flow, and so you can actually ascertain how the building works in relation to ventilation, noise, and sunlight. Now, the fourth item you need is a portable speaker. Number 4. It's a portable speaker, and I'll show you mine so you can see how this works. This is my portable speaker. Every time I do a viewing, I try to ensure that I have this with me, especially if it's a viewing for a leasehold property. If it's a freehold, then I guess in many ways this is not so critical. But if it's a leasehold building, you need a portable speaker. Why is this important? Well, I'll go back to what I said before. Many buildings in Great Britain have very poor acoustics. And ideally, it's important that you find out in advance of the purchase if noise and the travel of noise to and from the property is a major issue. The reason I recommend having a portable speaker is because, number one, it's a wireless speaker. It's a wireless speaker. It's something you can lift, you can carry. There are smaller versions, but you need this, and I'll explain in the subsequent sessions how you can use this device to test the sound insulation and the integrity of insulation of the floors and the walls. So keep that in mind. Speaker. Now, the fifth item you need, no doubt, is a mobile phone. Very simply, in parts of Great Britain. Now, in Great Britain, we have buildings that are called period. These are buildings that predate a particular time period. They're old buildings, built sometimes hundreds and hundreds of years prior to today. The purpose of having a mobile phone is because in some buildings, not all, it tends to be the case that some of these buildings have very poor mobile signal throughout or in spots in the building. And it's important to know, firstly, whether there is enough signal in the building or if there are signal issues in the building. The reason for this, signal issues has to do with the age of construction and the type of material the building was built with. When you have your mobile phone, if you can, you should test. You should do a test, data test and voice test. So just make a call to a loved one, and just use your mobile phone and see if you can access the internet whilst you're in the building, and that should give you an idea as to whether there are issues. And try to do this in various areas of the building. Now, number 6 is another device that I think is particularly important in specific locations and in certain areas. What I'm referring to here is what I call a portable moisture meter. I'll show you mine so you can see what it looks like. This is a moisture meter, and what you have here is a device I'm going to show you how this works so you can see the operation in real time. Different building materials have different concentrations and ability to absorb and retain moisture or water. This device is a simple one, but it's affordable. So if you look at the rear of this device, what you see here is moisture level for wood and for concrete. It gives you different levels, low, medium, high. It gives you the range for each material, what is low, what is medium, what is high. This is wood. So quite simple. You have to, if you want to check the moisture content of this board, all you have to do is place the two extensions, moisture on the board or on the device. I know you can't see this, but let me bring this closer. It reads 0. 0. So that tells you this is the table, because it's dry, has a moisture content of 0. Very, very, very simple to use. Very effective. Now let me expand on that slightly so you can understand why I have recommended this. During your inspection, it's important to check thoroughly for signs of moisture or damp, within the property. And for that reason, I highly recommend that you have a portable handheld moisture damp meter. The major risks that usually come from damp has to do with what we call Ryzen Damp. And Ryzen Damp is something that most people are familiar with, but a lot of people are not familiar with. It has to do with hydrostatic water pressure on surfaces. Usually if you have, think about this, let's say this is James, and James owns this house. This is ground level, but let's assume that James has a basement, and his basement, he has a living area there, or a play area. Hydrostatic water pressure will be something that James needs to consider, because also whenever you have a space below ground, there will be hydrostatic water pressure on the structure if the structure is below ground. So for cellars and basements, it tends to be the case that there will be pressure from the water in the soil, effectively looking for the path of least resistance. So if James had not bought this property, it would be the right thing for James to do to have a moisture meter and to check to see if there are any risks of rising damp. Sometimes you might find that the moisture or the water table or the water level is quite low, but over the different periods of times of the year, you have what we call rising damp. So the moisture starts to rise, and if it finds an opportunity, a crack, moisture will start to flow into the basement. So just keep that in mind. The second risk that comes from moisture or water leak has to do with what we call penetrating damp. Penetrating damp is slightly different from rising damp. Rising damp has to do with hydrostatic pressure from below ground. Penetrating damp has to do with water ingress from the roof, from the elements. So this is where you have maybe rain, and let's say James's building has a chimney. You can have water, that's the chimney, you can have water ingress from the chimney walls or inside the chimney breast, and it makes its way into the building. So you might find that there's a particular wall that is damp because this chimney does not have a cowl or cover. So all the water, maybe from the roof, is flowing down and it's penetrated through, let's say that's the chimney breast. And normally there will be a cover, and let's say this chimney breast, and in between, if this assume this is brick, you have mortar, you have the rendering. If this rendering has become weak, you could have water ingress through the brick, and it comes into the building. So you have penetrating damp that comes from the roof, the chimney, or sometimes you could even have what we call rainwater fixtures. So the rainwater pipes that run on the surface of the building, you could have leaks such that water over a long period of time starts to penetrate the external structure and come into the building. Usually that is usually of major concern. Minor risks such as internal surface condensation could be caused by poor ventilation, and that can be easily remedied. So small minor risks such as you have a bathroom and you notice that there is some moisture on the ceiling, primarily because the space is not ventilated. That can be rectified, but it's also important to test with the portable moisture meter just to make sure that you know what you're getting into. Now, one of the reasons for all of this is because later on down the line, before you make an offer on a property, you'd like to estimate all of the costs of making good. So for example, if the bathroom has surface condensation caused by poor ventilation, it could be that you have to buy a new ventilation fan. So when you're thinking about what price to pay, you would have to assume a cost for installing a new fan, but also the labor cost for some repair person to come down and fix it. Now, the fan could cost you, say, £500, but the labor cost, depending on how long it takes and the type of building it is, the type of installation in terms of whether the fan is on the wall. If it's a wall-mounted fan, that's quite easy. But if it's a fan in the ceiling and it has to be ducted to the atmosphere, that could cost you a lot more as a result of labor costs. So keep that in mind. Now, number 7 is a video or photo recording device. You already have this. That's your mobile phone. So the mobile phone in many ways does so many things. You have your recording function. You could also use the mobile phone to test for the data, the quality of the data.